Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Quarter, where we participate and celebrate the innovators, the entrepreneurs existing here in our area in Southwest Florida. And today, I'd like to introduce you initially to Narrative Coffee. They're part of the overall coffee culture, kind of erupting here in the general area. And they've been sponsors to us, so shout out to you guys. Thank you so much. Delicious and nutritious coffee going all the way down.
So today for our guests, we got my boy, Jason Teeters, founder of Jet Set State, master's degree in industrial organizational psychology, and he develops coaching programs for lifestyle development for people to help people reach their goals. So that's a very brief introduction for Jason. He's got an interesting background, so I'll let him jump into it.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. It's exciting to be able to share my love for really building up the culture in Southwest Florida and really partnering with a group of individuals and the Curate brand that's really focused on bringing this sort of lifestyle to the forefront so people can see what we're doing down here. So I'm excited to be here. I look forward to hopefully
absolutely
successful podcast, right?
Well, I mean, I'm excited to have you on as like our first episode of 2018 because you, me, and the person who introduced me to you, Stefan, had met somewhat frequently. You and Stefan are neighbors, and when we first met you, you were still trying to develop kind of your niche around Jet Set State, and you were still trying to hone in on exactly who your target audience was, how you're going to market to them. And one of the things that's been awesome for me to watch is like you starting to snowball that and starting to develop that audience and figure out exactly where you're going to hone in on and like what value you're going to bring to people. So let people know a little bit about Jet Set State and what you're doing with that.
No, yeah, that's great. So Jet Set State is a lifestyle design company, and our goal is to help business owners adapt successfully to a changing environment. And that's really important to me because of my background in education and learning and training and development.
Right.
And our goal is to really give business owners the ability to move forward in their life or in their business with confidence and clarity. We live in a time where things are drastically changing. The world is changing. Business is changing. Technology is changing. At some point, ourselves, we have to start to look at how we're going to change.
Right.
And how we create a successful business and life that not only creates value for our clients and customers, but also creates value for ourselves.
Right.
And so that's the direction that I'm trying to take Jet Set State.
So just so people know, like, so I want you to kind of jump into it for a second, but Jason isn't somebody that just like watched a few Tony Robbins lectures and decided to do some consulting on lifestyle changing. You actually have a degree that qualifies you to do this specifically. So kind of go into like some of the stuff you learned in developing that master's degree in industrial organizational. I know I've asked you that like 6 times today, but
no, that's great. Yeah, so I got a master's degree in IO psychology from the Chicago School of Psychology. But I believe that I was already on this path long before I knew it.
Right.
Grew up in Indiana, small farming town.
Yeah.
My parents moved me there from a predominantly black school to a predominantly white school around 3rd grade.
Yeah.
And so with that came this fear of not wanting to stick out.
Okay.
Right? And so you find ways to adapt. You find ways to fit in. You know, I learned my country line dancing. I learned how to bale hay.
Yeah.
I've driven John Deeres and all these things, and that has given me insight into how to connect with others.
Right.
And then, of course, I played college football. And so as I move into college football, I realized that I don't know a lot about the black culture. So then that infused me back again into the black culture, which is very strong within my background. And I knew a lot about it, but I've never had the vernacular to be able to spend time with a large group of individuals. And so
interesting.
That required me to adapt as well. And so through those 2 experiences, I've realized that I've been able to stay true to myself And by doing that, that has allowed me the opportunity to just sort of be a chameleon across both planes.
Right.
And that's been extremely valuable in just going out situations and opportunities to really sort of propel my life forward.
Yeah.
And so with that, it increased the opportunity for me to come down to Southwest Florida to be an educator and a football coach. And so that allowed me to get into education, which I wasn't a big fan of. Just meaning I was not valedictorian of my class. If that says anything. But being down here allowed me to better understand some of the things that were going on in Southwest Florida. It allowed me to connect to individuals and students that were not having the experience or the ability to speak to someone that has a varying background or was able to communicate at a level that I didn't like school either.
Yeah.
You know, so I just want to help you accomplish what you need to accomplish and have some success.
No, that's interesting that you mentioned that in your overall life experience, you've kind of had to adapt, and it seems as though you're hoping to kind of shorten that gap through your company and overall your presence in the community is shorten the gap towards that adaptation, if you will. And from that perspective, did it take you a while, like early on, to adapt? And were there some experiences that pushed you forward, or is that something that you wanted to share with others?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that really stick out. One was at a conversation probably around 24, 25, when you hit sort of that quarter life crisis and you're like, man, I was going to be married, I was going to have this Jag, I was going to have this big house, and I don't have any of it right now. And I was talking to a gentleman who was, he was about 60, I think 60, 65, really good guy, and we were just having a conversation. He said, it's really important for you to understand that people will always tell you how they became wealthy. And they will always tell you where they failed. And he's like, the biggest important lesson for you is to listen. Because if you can minimize the gap right, between success and failure, then that's the true way you're going to succeed. And so that really opened my eyes to listen to anybody I had a conversation with, because you can learn so many things about what they've been through and how they've had success and failures, and then try to either copy that or try to manipulate it so it works in your favor. But the whole time understanding that others have went through this sort of path and I don't have to go at it on my own. So that was a big change for me. I think the second big change that happened for me is I traveled out of the country. So I just got my master's degree. I was excited. I was expecting to get a huge pay raise. Told all my bosses, hey, I got this degree. When are you going to start paying me more? And unfortunately, for a lot of us, we don't, we sort of pursue these paths without thinking about the end in mind. And once I got the degree, I realized that there was no place on the corporate ladder for me to move forward. And so I ended up taking about 3 weeks off. I took my max vacation, and my wife and I backpacked through Thailand for 3 weeks.
Awesome.
And that was, I think, traveling for anybody, but especially for Americans, we don't get to do that a lot. We don't take use of our vacations. We don't take use of our time. So be able to do that on the back end of getting my degree was sort of an eye opener. And it allowed me to realize that adapting in a foreign country, you start to pay attention to the things that really matter. Right? How do I get to this location? How do I get dinner? How do I get lunch? How do I find a restroom? And those little things start to become small wins for you. And so Thailand became a small win, and we traveled a couple of places after that. And what I started to realize is that the key to learning, the key to advancing your life or your business or success comes with creating momentum. If I can start to consistently learn more and do more and adapt more and apply more to my life, then over time I'm going to create a wealth of knowledge that
Right.
I don't know how it's going to fit me.
Right.
Exactly.
But I'm at least gaining some knowledge that's hopefully going to help me in
Right.
future conversations, future business deals, or opportunities that come their way.
And I wanted to touch on something you said a minute ago too, which was that being a chameleon. So like that's something that I feel like I have a similar situation to that, in that I'm very agile in the information that I absorb. So like one of the most frustrating things for me is like working in politics, and everybody has such a strict kind of viewpoint on everything. And I was kind of the person that's like, well, if a Democrat says something that I agree with, then it might change my view on something. And learning agile like that, I think, is one of the key things to succeeding in a fast-paced kind of economy like that America's going through right now. So one of the things that you talk a lot about is that, like, you put me onto a book, Psycho-Cybernetics, by I think his name's Maxwell Maltz or something.
Max Waltz, yep.
So like that book talks a lot about like where you'll have the traditional kind of Tony Robbins, inspirational talk, and then you'll have another level to that, which is what Psycho-Cybernetics talks about, which is like it's more of a brain chemistry thing. Like you can get fired up and inspired for short periods of time, but you have to really rewire your brain to be successful long term. And that's one of the things that you work with in your coaching programs, is telling people how to set legitimate goals, short-term goals, long-term goals. And you just recently had a successful event at, I think it was the Ritz or something in Bonita Springs?
Millennial Brewery.
Okay. And you were on a panel with a few other people, and then you held an educational event that lasted a certain period of time. So tell us a little bit about that and what you taught some of the people through that.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I try to work with individuals and talk about a lot is self-confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I don't know where we get mixed up, through life. We sort of believe that we should be perfect at everything we do,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a learning stage.
Yeah.
We didn't drive correctly the first time we got behind the wheel. We didn't walk correctly the first time, but somehow we put this undue stress on ourselves to be perfect at everything,
Right.
to the point that we don't try anything. And so a lot of times when we talk about, and the Tony Robbins, I love Tony Robbins.
Right.
Yeah.
Me too.
Right? I love Earl Nightingale and Think and Grow Rich and all these motivational books and these self-help books. I mean, they are exactly what you need when you need it.
Exactly.
And I think it's important for people to understand that they don't work unless you work. Right? Like I can't, unless I'm ready to make real change in my life, then I could read a million books and they're not going to work. So once you realize that I'm the only person that can affect the change that I want in my life, then these books can help close the gap and help you get there.
Right.
Yeah, because I think some of those books tend to be that first opening door, right? That it ultimately is starting a paradigm shift, if you will, right? Of okay, now I need to, and I think for Tony Robbins, for example, or some of those books, it challenges who am I surrounded by, what is it that I want, thinking about some of the goals, but I think a lot of it kind of stops before it gets to the practical steps, which is...
We've talked about it before, and I've talked to you about it before, is something that I like, I call it motivation porn, where people will be dependent on these speakers to like get them fired up, but then they don't execute on it. And it takes a certain level of discipline to rewire your brain to be able to see that and recognize it and internalize it, but then go out and execute it to actually change your life based off of that. Like that doesn't do any good if the only time you get fired up and do anything is if after you watch a 3-hour, Zig Ziglar speech or Tony Robbins speech or whatever. And that's something that you focus on a lot, and that's something that book that you recommended, Psycho-Cybernetics, focuses on, the neuropsychology of self-discipline, like all these other books that had led me from that. Kind of gives you a graduate level of understanding around this self-help stuff, whereas like The Secret or the Tony Robbins will be kind of your onboarding to that, and then once you kind of graduate to different levels, you realize that it's more of an internal thing that you have to do as opposed to relying on outside third parties to give you your own motivation.
Yeah, well, and I think you're absolutely correct, and I love the fact that somehow I'm downplaying Tony Robbins content on this, but in actuality, I think that it's important for us to understand that we need practical solutions, right? For a lot of individuals, I say the Generation X and the Millennials, a lot of us are overwhelmed and overworked, right? We are trying to chase two rabbits, and there's no way you can catch both of them, right? We want to be one thing to our friends, we want to be another thing to ourselves, we want to be another thing to our parents, and so it gets us to a point where we have this paradox of choice and we do nothing, right? And if we don't think we're going to win, then we're definitely not going to do anything.
Right.
And so my goal in Jet Set State is to first start with getting people to realize that we need to focus on one simple thing that we want to happen in our life. And we need to make sure we put forth the effort to sort of move in that direction. Right. Now, you have to be comfortable with failing, but the key is once you make a decision and go down that path, then it either A, moves you in the direction you want to go, or B, you realize you don't want to do it. And so then that's one less thing that you have to have. Like, I thought I was going to be a dancer. Oh, well, I'm terrible. Okay, well, that's off my list.
And that's one of the things that, like, I don't think I've ever would have been introduced to you if Stefan and I haven't had that similarity in that we are okay with failing and okay with, like, looking at life as a learning opportunity as opposed to thinking that, you know, I want to be rich through going this avenue, but I want to be an expert in it immediately. Like, you have to... And then you look at any, like, smart individual throughout history, like Albert Einstein or anybody that they talk about, even when you've reached that level of intelligence, they still look at life as a learning opportunity. Like, you don't fail, you learn. So any failure opportunity any failure that you know, comes your way, you don't look at it as a failure, you look at it as a learning opportunity to propel you forward. Yeah. It's the people who look at it as a failure and that dwell in it and, like, They wake up every day with a mindset of subtraction as like, okay, I can't do this because of this. I can't do this because of this. Instead of waking up every day doing addition where it's like, okay, I'm good at this. I can do this. I can do this. Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that's exciting about some of the stuff that you teach your people is like, it's developing that mindset's one thing, but then it doesn't matter unless you have a goal structure around it. So like, one of my problems for a long time was like I had that mindset and I knew that I was going to be successful at some point, but I didn't know, like I didn't develop a path for myself. Yeah. So like, and that's one of the things that's most interesting about what you teach your people is like developing that paving that road to get to that point is like it's just as important as developing the mindset in the first place.
Without a doubt. I think, you know, the first thing I would say, number one, is that fear is a real thing, right? Mm-hmm. So many of us have these expectations of ourselves of who we should be and who we want to be. And so it is difficult for people to overcome fear. Mm-hmm. But I think the key to overcoming fear is consistency and momentum, right? Once you start to pick a direction and move in a direction, then you get better and you build your self-confidence. And so I completely understand when people say something like, "Oh, you know, I have a fear," because that's a true thing. You can't avoid it, right? And if I had to stand up and do comedy in front of 1,000 people, there would be a natural fear associated with that, right? Right. But the idea is that if you can focus on the things that matter, if you can focus on the things that are going to get you better, then that fear becomes sort of second nature, and you can start to move through the process.
And what you said, what you said about the fear situation was interesting because I've done a lot of public speeches and I'm terrible with public speaking. But it's one of those things where you like, even in comedy, like new comedians will say the same thing. It's like once you get up there and fail, it becomes less of an obstacle to get over the next time you get up there. And then the next time you get up there, it becomes less of an obstacle. So for me, like I've almost embraced failing at this point. Like, okay, I'll shoot for the stars on this thing. And if I completely fail and crash, I'll learn something that puts me miles ahead of somebody who hasn't done that. So like that's one of the interesting things to me about failing forward as opposed to dwelling on your own failure, which is something that people definitely need to learn and definitely need to internalize. Like they look at, especially with social media and stuff like this, right? Everybody wants to look like a success in other people's eyes before they've reached the level of success. And you have to realize that people are going to see you fail, and you have to just be okay with it. And you have to see, like, you have to use that as motivation. Well, I'm going to show these people, like, once I do succeed, they're going to be that much more impressed with it, as opposed to being so scared to take a leap into something that because of the failure that people look at.
Exactly.
Keeping you from doing something because of that.
Yeah, and I think the best way, that I tell my clients and just anybody is that if you're going to go that path, you need to make sure that you know why you're traveling down that path.
Right.
And so for a lot of us, like you said, comparing ourselves to others or trying to do something because somebody else did it, a lot of times that fear of failure becomes real because it doesn't link to who they are as an individual. Right. And they're trying to be somebody without really saying, like, this matches with me. Exactly. This works for me and who I am. Right. And I think once you start to hone in on your identity and what you want from your life, then it makes it easier to have that sort of tough talk with, I'm failing forward, right? I'm failing forward because I know the direction I'm trying to get to. But if you're trying to do something just because you saw somebody else do it and you fail, well, then you feel like a failure. Right.
Exactly.
Right? And it's hard to explain to anybody because they're like, well, why did you do that? And you can't really say it because it's not what you really wanted.
Right, exactly.
So I've definitely, I think there are a lot of cool things that working alongside somebody like yourself can be a pivotal moment in a lot of people's life. But for those people that have never interacted with somebody that has ultimately been like that overall coach, what does your process look like? And how do you currently work with your clients?
So currently my program, I do a signature program called Unpacked. Yeah. And it's an 8-week interactive program. And the idea is that I take people through eliminating the mental and physical clutter that sort of holds them back so they can move forward with confidence and clarity. And it really comes down to stop procrastinating and start doing.
Right. Yeah.
And so from that aspect, a couple of things that I talk about is, I always start with mindset. I think that's a really important thing in anything you're going after. And the 3 things that I always stress to people is it comes down to self-honesty, self-image, self-action.
Yeah.
Right? And from the self-honesty standpoint, anybody that is trying to better themselves, I always say that you have to take responsibility. Right? We've all been this way, right? Our parents have helped us out. We've sort of deferred our decisions to either the news or our parents or our spouses, right? And we've never taken full responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing in anything you try.
Right.
My thing that I like to talk about is when you think of Game of Thrones or some of these other shows, there's always this person that has to tell them the bad news, like, sorry, King, we're not going to be able to do that. And we have this idea, like, don't kill the messenger.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there was a true fear that you're going to tell somebody what they don't want to hear. They're not going to be happy about it. They're going to kill you.
Right.
Right. And in today's society, we sort of follow that same standpoint. Like, we have to be honest with what works and what doesn't. Because if we're not clear about what is going to make us better, if we're not clear about the direction we're going, then you're lying to yourself.
Right.
And anybody can rationalize or tell ourselves rational lies on why we can't succeed.
Right.
And so self-honesty is the first thing I teach all my clients, is that we have to get really clear, because I can't help you and you can't help yourself if you don't know what you truly want from your life.
I think that's a key. Issue too, because one of the reasons Tim wanted to name the show Beyond the Quarter was, like, once you reach that age of 25, you feel like you're already supposed to be at a certain level. But I think a better way to look at it is, like, once you reach the age of 25, you probably have a good idea of what you're good at, what you're not good at this point. So if you continue down a path that's kind of based on you're doing something, you're getting your degree because your parents want you to do it, or you're going into this job because you feel like it's going to give you a certain level of status among your peers or whatever, then it's your own fault at that point, and you have to take responsibility for it. And, like, one of the things for me that changed my whole life around is, like, I've gone through more failures by the age of 25 than most people have gone through in their 30s or 40s. And like the moment I started looking at every single failure that came my way as my responsibility 100%, instead of passing it off on, whoever, that's the moment you really change, because then you don't go down a certain path until you know you're going to be successful at it, because if you fail at it, it's 100% your fault, nobody else's fault. And it's a matter of brain chemistry at that point. You just have to rewire your brain to realize, like, I'm not going to start this company because I know the level of adversity I'm going to face until I can get successful with this company. It's the people who feel like, I want to be an entrepreneur because it's cool to be an entrepreneur, and I'm going to start this company and I'm going to get rich and buy Lambos, and then they get faced with this level of adversity, and then they just can't deal with it.
Right.
And I have a friend that worked in Silicon Valley, and you and I talked about this earlier, and he was saying that the suicide rate among millennials in Silicon Valley is like astronomical, and nobody talks about it. And it's because people think it's cool to be an entrepreneur, so they go down the route, and then once they're faced with the adversity, they don't know how to deal with it. Yeah. So I think that's something that people definitely need to internalize, is like, you take responsibility for your failures, but at the same time, you have to learn how to learn from your failures and fail forward.
Well, and I love that you sort of open that floodgate for that conversation, because it's absolutely true. You have to be responsible. But I agree that for all of us, we are creatures of habit.
Yeah.
Right? Everything we've learned from our parents, and our parents have learned from their parents, right? The way I make my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, the way that I cook dinner, right? It's these habits that we learn, and for a lot of us, these habits are who we are. And so I think for a lot of people, when you go down a path of creating a life that is designed for you, I think it's really important for you to get clear about who you are and what you want, right? Because so many of us want to conform. I want to be an entrepreneur like this individual. I want to do music like this individual. I want to create, podcasts like Curate, right? People want to go down that path, and when you hold yourself to a standard without knowing exactly what it takes to sort of hold that level, then you're gonna meet failure, and that's not gonna be positive in any situation. And so I'm a big believer in it, and you talked about, I'm gonna come back to the quarter 25, and having tough time. But even for individuals in their 40 now, right? They have been living a life that up until the last 10 years has been sort of smooth sailing. I get my job, I get my paycheck, I invest in my 401k, my family's going to do great, I get my 2 weeks of vacation, and it is what it is, right? And over the last 10 years, we have seen a shift in the amount of technology coming our way, the amount of information are coming our way. And how do you handle this change when it breaks your habits? Right? When we know that I want to wake up and do this on this day, and I have to go in there and answer an email and stuff like that. And so it's for me, the most important thing that I think about for my business is, how do I get people to build the skills and tactics they need to survive the next 20, 30 years. And the idea of learning, unlearning, and relearning is a real concept that we all have to start becoming familiar with. And so that's something that always weighs on me when we talk about the happiness level and the wealth level of individuals and how they feel internally about themselves. Now with the 25-year-olds, there's a line that said, how was I forget? He said, I could tell you what it's like because I've been there. Right? And so I think it's important for a younger generation to understand that the work ethic is important. Right? We've seen our grandparents and even our parents have a solid work ethic to sort of create a life that was better for us. But also, I think we have a lot of false ideas of who we're supposed to be by a certain time. I mean, when we think about us living to, let's say, 100, Right?
Yeah.
Most, over the next 10, 20 years, it's not going to be possible for more people to live to 100.
Right.
And so when you think about the first 25 years, right, from 0 to 18, you really had very little decisions of your own, right? Maybe what you wanted to wear, what you listened to.
Right.
But besides that, building a skill and a level without just going to school is very, very challenging to put that out in the real world.
Yeah.
And so for a younger generation, I'm very cognizant to tell them that the 25 is a good time, right? Because you've failed, you've been able to make mistakes without really big consequences. And there's been some, but not really big consequences.
That's the big thing for me too. Is like I know, and I've talked about this before. Like I know if I go on a certain venture and I completely blow it up and I completely fail, still 25, so like what's the worst that can happen?
Again.
I spend the next 10 years going the average route or going the normal route, and I can still be at the same level a lot of people are at. So like that's the big thing for me too, is like you reach that level of 23, 24, 25, 26, somewhere around there, you have an idea of your own personality. If you're like some of us are that do self-analyzing a lot, you have an idea of your own personality to a point to where you're like, okay, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this, let's double down on this and let's kind of punt this for a little bit, and I'll get better at this down the road. But that's kind of the thing that a lot of people like yourself and like Gary Vaynerchuk and other people talk about.
Yeah.
And it's one of the interesting things about you going down the route that you're going, because like when Stefan first introduced me to you, I was like, holy shit, we need to get this guy on a stage. Like you're so good with like communicating ideas to people and communicating your own passion around certain subjects to people. And I'm like, this is the perfect route for somebody like this to be going. Like if you were a lawyer or something, like I would just be like, man, that's just such a waste, because like what you're doing is so perfect for your own personality. And I think like once you reach that level of 24, 25, 26, you start to develop that. And then if you don't go down that route, then it's your own fault at that point. Like you know yourself enough to know what path you should be going down. And then if you're too scared to go down that path, then you can't blame anybody else when you're 30, 40 years old and you're upset with yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. And it took a while to get here. I didn't get my master's to after my 30s. And that at that point was when I finally built the confidence in myself to say, F it, I'm gonna do what I want to do. Right. And that takes some courage. And
so for anybody that's in that similar state, right, thinking about that step one, and they could be frustrated, they could be overwhelmed, what would you say that first one step was for you, or echoing towards somebody that's in that state at this time?
Yeah, so, and this is a cool thing. So it's called the logical levels of learning, right? And this is one of the things that I always find important when I talk to anybody that's trying to make real change in their life, right?
Yeah.
Scientific studies, and I can't remember the guy is Dan something, but he came up years ago with the scientifics of logical learning, and he says that any change we want to make in our life really comes down to sort of five key things, right? And one is, first, we have to connect to our identity. And then from our identity, it comes down to our behavior. And then from there, it comes down to our capabilities, then beliefs, and then environment. And so what happens as individuals, if I want to start a new diet, right? I want to lose weight and I'm starting a new diet, I'm going to go to this extreme. And so I'm changing my environment, right? Or if I go to the gym, first of the year I'm going to the gym at 6 a.m. and I'm going to do that for a month, right? And that's changing our environment. And for a lot of us, we don't recognize the fact that at the core of who we are, right? It comes down to our identity, right? I can only be who I am.
Right.
And so if I'm a person that is trying to start a diet and I'm doing all these things to only eat, 2 hours a day of the whole entire day, right? These crazy diets.
Something extreme,
right? At the end of the night, when I'm home by myself and nobody's watching me, I am still that person that wants to eat. I'm still that person that wants the ice cream. I'm still that person.
That's it's a good thing to talk about in January too, because I'm a huge opponent of New Year's resolutions.
Right.
So like, imagine how annoying it must be to somebody who's been going to the gym straight 3, 4, 5 days a week every day for years, and then at the beginning of the year in January you get this flood of people who are going to change their lives, and then 2 weeks into it,
they're gone.
Their identity, it clashes with their identity, and they're gone.
And they don't. And so I always say, I didn't smoke a cigarette this morning.
Right.
Why not? Because I'm not a smoker. And so whenever you think about changing, right, to move yourself in a different direction, you first need to be cognizant of who you are.
Right.
And my core identity, I am not, or I am, right? So I'm a person that works out in the morning. I'm a person that starts to eat healthy. And then from there, I change my beliefs. I change my capabilities.
Right.
I change my behavior. I change my environment. And so the last thing you should be doing is making these changes to your current outside state.
Right.
And you should start internally. And so that's a big thing that I always tell people. You can only be who you are.
Right.
And so if you want to be a person that starts a successful business that creates either content or creates products or educates or trains people, then at the very core, you have to start living the life of an individual that does that.
Right.
And get down to the basic sense of what does that person do? And we have countless of people that have shown us the way of how they've created success.
Right.
And so now you start to use Instagram, and you start using Facebook, and you start using these social platforms to say, wow, what did Gary Vee do this morning?
Yeah.
What did Tony Robbins do? What did Curate put out on their podcast? What did they do each and every day? And then you wake up with that belief that I need to start down that path first.
Right.
And that to me is the core at creating any type of change that you want to last. And they sort of say, a lot of people do the be do have, right? If I can be this person, then I'll be able to do these things and I'll have this wealth. And you have to start with the idea of, what do I have to do, right, to become the individual I want to become, to have the life that I want to have.
Right.
And so when you start thinking in those parameters, you could start to lay out that if I want to lose weight, right, I need to wake up first and maybe
what are you giving for it, right? What are you investing to come in that outcome? Right. And I think it's interesting because you think about different timelines of overall human existence. So I think it's kind of funny, as you were talking there, I think about the idea of a mirror. And so imagine at some point in time there was no idea of a mirror, right? And so you almost had a picture of yourself that you had, whether it was through the reflection of the water, and then you could define it yourself. But now I feel as though we're always living for that mirror of how others see us,
right?
Whether through our social media platforms or how you physically look at yourself in the mirror, or holding a measuring stick that you didn't meet the expectations of others, right? And you're ultimately letting them be that mirror for you.
I think too, a lot of people, like, I'll even put it in simplistic terms, where a lot of people they'll look at LeBron James winning a championship and they'll be like, I want to be like him. But when LeBron James is waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and doing his cardio and doing all this stuff, they don't want to be him then, because they'll set their alarm for 4 o'clock in the morning, but they'll delete the alarm app, or they won't wake up. So then it's you're clashing with your own brain chemistry at that point. You're like, okay, well, if you want to be at this level of whatever industry or whatever type of thing that you want to do, then you have to perform at that level when nobody's watching. You have to be the one that's waking up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning studying, or if you're a marketer, you're studying different new kind of things of marketing, and you have to really live that, as opposed to only living it through social media so other people see it. There's an interesting psychological term, I can't think about it, I can't figure out what the name of it is yet, but it's basically says that when you put something out on social media and other people see it and you're faking it, it gives you the same brain chemistry relief as if you're actually doing it. So then you don't actually go out and execute and do it, which is something that was really interesting to me. So it's like, you can act like you can rent these cars and act like you have this level of wealth, and then you put that out on social media, and then it gives you this, from a brain chemistry standpoint, it gives you that same type of relief as if people really saw you doing that in real life.
Right. Well, and I think the you know, this is my first time really saying this out loud. This is my opinion.
Right.
But I am now under the true belief that the term "fake it till you make it"
Right.
is no longer applicable in today's society, because
100%.
what we're doing is we're putting ourselves out so far past the ledge of
Right.
debt and frustrations and fear and doubt, because we want to say, well, I'll get this car and then I'll eventually get the wealth, and then when I get it, then I'll be able to take care of it.
Right.
And so far, so many of us have sort of positioned out and
Right.
put out all of our money and expenses in this idea of saying that this is who I am. And when it doesn't come true, then there is a serious downfall, because you now have to think about all the things that you did and said and how people are going to judge you.
Right.
And so, you know, switch that. And I don't want it to be a negative aspect. I want people to understand that your individuality is what is going to create success for you in the future.
Right.
Right? Being different. Being an individual. You don't like LeBron James. You don't like Stephen Curry. You don't like the music you like because they sound like other people. You like them because they're saying something different, and they're giving you a perspective that is different. And so in a world that we live in now, where we have social media and content and businesses that are trying to find ways to connect to a culture, a generation, a group of people, it comes down to the individual that can be different, that can say I'm different, and then that can provide value to people to help them get to that next rung. And I think anybody that's listening, any young individual that's out there that is like, I want to take over the world, I still want you to have that idea, but I want you to enjoy the fact that you're eating ramen for 15 days a week.
Well, so
that
like,
you don't have the money to go out
you
and
talk
that
to,
you're
you
buying
talk to
6
any,
packs with 5 friends, right?
Exactly.
You talk to any really successful kind of business person or entrepreneur, they won't tell you where they're at now is the most enjoyable part. They'll tell you the mountain they've had to climb to get to the point that they're at now is, if they could go back and do it again, is the part that they would enjoy the most. So that's something like that you've talked about, where if you read books, you don't necessarily have to go through the ups and downs that these people who have spent 10 years to get to a point where they write this book. You can read the book and realize, like, okay, the journey is the most enjoyable part. So enjoy the journey now, instead of looking back saying, oh, I wish I enjoyed the journey to get to this point.
I mean, in all of this and everything we're doing, the three of us here, everybody that's watching, everybody that's in this world, the journey is what makes all this worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? When I'm 60, 75 years old, it's going to be content I can share with my daughter on stuff that I said my voice, I said what I wanted, I helped people, or I created something that created value for others.
One of the big things that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about too is like saying that there's nothing more depressing than going to like a nursing home and looking in the eyes of some 80, 90-year-old man that has no more time left in his life and seeing regret. And like him talking about regretting not doing this or that or that. And there's nothing you can do about it at that point. So like take advantage of it while you're young, but also enjoy the failing aspect to it and enjoy the climb to get to the top to where you want to be.
And understand that failing is learning.
Right.
Right? If you apply what you learn, and then you can just move forward.
Exactly.
But it's funny, I was golfing a couple months ago, and it was a twosome, me and another buddy, and we got paired up with these older gentlemen, and we're teeing off, and we get to about the 5th hole, and the guy turns around to both of us, and he's like, man, I'd give anything to be 50 again. And it was just this idea that we were nowhere close to 50, but these guys realized that if they could go back to being 50, they would do it so much differently. And so to me, that it's those type of conversations that I don't want to have.
Right.
Exactly. I don't want to be sitting anywhere and looking at a group of young guys like, oh my gosh, man, I wish I could do it all over again.
Leave it all on the field.
Leave it all on the field. And I think for something like this, even what Cure's doing in Southwest Florida, I think that's huge, because I've been here for so long in Southwest Florida,
Right.
and it has been an echo chamber of everybody that I've known
Right.
in this sort of area that said, "Man, I wish there was more culture here.
Right.
Man, I wish there was more music. Man, I wish there was more people sort of bringing people that are doing great stuff to the forefront."
Right.
Exactly.
And to have that now, right, is something that's exciting. And the fact that you
Right.
guys are a part of it is something exciting because we don't know where this is going to take us. But it's going to be something on
Right.
your stamp of approval or your
Right.
passport, like, yes,
Exactly.
and created something.
Younger
in
people
Southwest
that
Florida.
live through this social media lens too, and that's why I try to promote, and that's why I encourage anybody that's watching to promote people that are putting themselves out there, because you have to realize how hard it is for people in our generation that grow up through that lens of social media to put themselves out there. People like yourself, people like Brian Benson, who has a podcast, people like all these people just share their content, pay it forward, and there's a lot of people that don't do that because of some psychological thing where it's like they're doing something and I'm not, so they feel like they want that person to fail because then it validates for themselves why they haven't taken that risk. So like that's why I feel like you should just always pay it forward, like, you know, share the content, develop the ecosystem. Like one of the good things about Southwest Florida is that it's not a Miami or an Orlando where you already have this tech hub or this like entrepreneurial base.
Yeah.
We're building that, and that's why I love like being a part of what Malik's doing with the Curate Network. Is like we're helping to develop that right now, and like right now is the time to get in the middle of that bubbling up of innovation and of like, you know, this revolution that's going on in Southwest Florida. These people, and like I believe you used to work at the Chamber, right? The Cape Coral Chamber.
I didn't work there, but I used to be a part of it.
The Chamber of Commerce. And like if you go to those things, it's just like this archaic kind of idea of where things are going and where things should be, and it's like it's very structured and archaic in that sense. And like,
well, and I think it served its purpose for, you know, when it was at its height.
right.
And I think we're now living in a world where competing is no longer the goal of success, right? It's bringing other people's in, it's creating value. And so, you know, I worked prior to starting my own business, I worked for a company called Pearson, which is one of the largest learning companies in the world.
Right.
And a lot of my conversations were with CEOs and developers and technology specialists, and we would sit down and have this conversation, and a lot of the conversations I was having with them was this fundamental idea of change, right? The idea that we have now access to information and technology, so let's just repurpose it and give that the exact same look, but on an iPad or on the computer. And it's like, no, you don't understand that we want to interact, right? We as individuals want to have value at the time that we need it, and we want it accessible so we can start to doing the things that we want to do. And a lot of the conversations that I would have after hours with some of these individuals was around this idea of where the world is going as it relates to a younger generation. And the value that I told a lot of the individuals that a lot of the CEOs and the hierarchy people in the older generation is that you have value in being able to sort of direct this younger generation in the things that they need, the skills, the sociable skills, the working skills, the business skills that are going to help them grow.
You have the opportunity to influence them.
Right. And you have to take advantage of the idea that they're helping you become more fluid and respond to change, because what we're doing now, the podcast system, the blogs, all this stuff may be obsolete in 10 years. But guess what? The stuff you learned while doing this may be the biggest chance for success in the next company or business that's being built.
Yeah, and I think I think that's the thing of like us grabbing onto that change and that driving forward. And I appreciate what you were saying a little bit earlier about what we're doing here as part of Curate. And I'm very curious. It's one of the the ideas of, I'm always curious about people's why, right? And you've mentioned that over and over and over. So thinking about long term, I think about like the 7 habits, right? So living with the end in mind.
Covey, yeah.
Exactly. So what is the lasting impact that you want to leave in Southwest Florida? And why is it that you do what you do?
My lasting impact, well, I guess I'll start with the why. It's my belief that I have been, because of my experience and knowledge, I've been gifted with this ability to connect with people. I've been gifted with this ability to put myself in other people's situations and then figure out what's some of the best ways to respond to our environment, to our situation, that makes it not only feasible for us to respond, but also that creates happiness, that creates wealth, that creates these things that make life worth living. And if at the end of your life you're not happy about what you've done, then it's all for nothing.
Yeah.
And so my idea is that I want to help individuals transition or adapt from this area of lack of confidence, lack of support, lack of understanding of how much value they could bring to the world. And if I can help a person realize what they're passionate about, realize what they want for their own life, and then push them in a direction to move forward, then to me, that is the only way I can create an environment, a society, a Southwest Florida that resonates and reflects what I want from the world, which is the idea that we as individuals, as humans, are here to build something together, to build something special, to create a world that makes it exciting to go out and exciting to have conversations and exciting to be around each other. And I of course I'm getting super passionate about this right now, but that's my lasting legacy, is that I want to help people find their why. I want to help people simplify, and that's one of the things that Jet Set State is all about. Is my idea is living life by design and not by default. And so much of us have this mental and physical clutter that stops us. It literally stops us from moving forward. And if I could show you through my travels and through my experiences and through what I learned, that by eliminating the things that doesn't bring you value, it creates more opportunity for you to have those moments that create vast amounts of value. And for example, I've been able to travel some amazing places. I've been able to spend the first 365 days of my daughter being born at home by her side every morning when she wakes up. That is something that for my dad and for my dad's dad and for almost 75% of our population, fathers don't have the time or the ability to be around for the raising of their children. And for that sort of guidance and the support of my spouse. I want to, create a world where my wife can live her wildest dreams and be the person that she wants to be, and know that she has somebody that supports her. And so if I could show people that it's possible, if I could show people that it's possible to have everything you want in your life, everything that you imagine, right, and still have the freedom and time and the ability to go out with friends, travel the world, and have the experiences you want, then to me, that is something that is worth living for and worth showing people how I've done it.
That's great. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think a lot of people, they float around. And I want to end on this thought of it seems like you help a lot of other people, but how is it that the greater Southwest Florida and overall Curate can help you?
It's great. I always tell people I want to help individuals that are looking to make real change in their life. My program launches the 1st of March.
Great.
It's an 8-week online program where I walk people through figuring out exactly what it is they want, and then helping them and guide them through that process. So by the end of the 8 weeks, they're able to start living the life that they want. Now, I always agree there's other things that I'll share if you follow me on jetsetstate.com or check out my Instagram, over the next couple of weeks, I'll be delivering content to sort of help people with that first step.
Delivering the value. One of the things I started getting in the routine of, and you'll see me on there commenting all the time, is your Wednesday wins.
Yeah.
So you do a live video every Wednesday morning, the Wednesday wins, which you can tell that you're completely focused on delivering as much value to people. So there's no point in buying the course unless they have already gotten a certain amount of value from you in the past.
Yeah, and my Wednesday wins it was my idea of just connecting with people and being my most honest self. Right, we all can get up here and say, "Hey, I'm Jason with Jet Set State, and this, and this." But I want people to start to think about, like, what can I do right now today in my life to make change? And so that's what Wednesday Wins is about. Follow me 9 a.m. Eastern, Jet Set State on Facebook. Please comment, let me know what you need, and then stay tuned, because over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to really start helping people design a life that works for them.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Thanks again for your time.
Oh my
really
gosh,
exciting.
Thank you guys so much. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you to Jason. Thank you to Malik, Curate Southwest Florida. You spend any time with Jason, you'll realize you need to follow him. Go to facebook.com, Jet Set State. We have Curate Business that's launching this year, so we'll be sharing all of his information on the podcast once it's released. Peace.